make sure everybody gets their point of view. So there will be a public comment section for people, the public. We are being recorded, so we ask that you keep it brief and appropriate. Make sure that you come up to the podium and speak if you do have a question at the appropriate time. Ask that everybody sign in, the CAB members and committee members, anybody that needs to, you can sign up at the back table. Waste Management Committee has one recommendation open, 312, liquid waste treatment maximization. And our next committee meeting will be October 7th, 4:30 to 6:20 p.m. right here at the DOE Meeting Center. And with that, I'd like to ask our presenter for today, which is he will be giving us the update on the saltstone disposal unit, vault number 4, Mr. Mike Borders from SRR, to come up and begin this process.
Okay, very good. Where would you like me to stand?
Do you want to use the clicker, or do you want James to do the slides for you?
I'll use it.
Okay. Back, and there's the pointer.
Got it. Good afternoon. I'm Mike Borders. I am the facility manager for DWPF and Saltstone. Thanks for inviting me here today to give you an update about the Vault 4 progress. The purpose of why I'm here today is really to fulfill a commitment that we made to your committee to come back and give you an update of where we are as far as Vault 4. And some of this I believe you've had in a previous presentation, so I'm going to do it by way of background for those who maybe haven't heard it, and if you want me to pick up the pace, feel free to tell me to move along, it's fine. The purpose I'm here really is to give you the status of the Vault 4. Vault 4 is one of the previous vaults that we've used in operating the Saltstone facility as far as disposing of contaminated ground. But part of that is to update some of the issues we've had with that, but also to talk about some low-level radioactive contamination we've had at our stormwater outfall, Z01, which is our retention basin Z4 for Saltstone, and some of the actions that we've taken to address those between us and the Department of Energy. By way of just a graphic, once again, the very familiar map of Savannah Riverside, and you can see the area is pretty much right close to the middle of the site, as far as where it's located, as far as the items we're discussing today. And over to the right, you can see an aerial view of Saltstone, the Saltstone disposal facility, and you can see several of the different vaults that we put radioactive grout in. The original vault that was filled is Vault 1. Vault 4, which is the subject of today's discussion, is right here. These are what we call SDUs, which is just the new name for our vaults that we put grout in. SDU2s we filled up this year. We're currently filling, this is the group vaults that we call SDUs 3 and 5, and there's 4 of them there, A and B for each one. That's where we're currently filling. And then this is an old picture where the trees are, and this is with the trees gone, and you can see we're starting the work on SDU 6, which is obviously much larger than the original vaults today. The issue, and I'll start by talking about Vault 4. Vault 4, once again, is operationally out of service. We have disconnected the lines as far as that where we would get radioactive grout in. We consider it operationally full. But the issue is that we've had cracks that allow rainwater to migrate into the vault, similar like you see cracks in, whether they be in structures that you may see around town concrete. We get weather cracks that happen, and it allows rainwater to get inside. And then basically what it does is the grout that's inside is solid, but it allows that rainwater to get up against that grout, if you will, into the annular space between the grout wasteform that's inside the vaults and the vault walls. What that can lead to, and what it has led to in the past, is that we get some contaminated liquid that weeps through, whether they be other cracks in the vault or construction joints, hard joints that we have in the vault construction. And usually when you see that, you'll see a minor wet spot like you see there typically when that does occur. We've had contamination controls in place as far as just dealing with that, and they're really under several different groupings. One of the main things that we try to do is prevent rainwater intrusion in the vault by using various coatings and sealants, both temporary ones and permanent ones, to make sure that we're always monitoring, looking for that, and sealing those cracks up when they occur. Another Another key thing that we do is we try to separate the clean water, if you will, away from and try to prevent clean water from rain and from the atmosphere of getting contaminated. So we have several items that we've put in place to do that with Vault 4. At the very top of the vault, we've got a gutter system that is mounted so that obviously the top of the vault is pretty much flat with a slight slope. Any of that clean rainwater that gets on top, it channels to the gutters that are here, and then we route from those gutters through a pipe like that into another set of gutters that we have around these huts that are all the way down the side. You see the contamination control huts that we have down the side of Vault 4. And the goal is all the clean water that gets on top, we want to shed it to the gutters down here, and then have all that clean water then shed away from the huts in the base of the vaults so that that water doesn't get contaminated and also doesn't get in the vaults. So that's one of the key things that we're doing, is trying to control the rainwater flow path to try to make sure it stays clean and gets away from the vaults and doesn't get contaminated. As we have had some contamination in the upper parts of the vaults, we fixed it whenever we have found it with paint to prevent that from migrating. And then one of the key things that we do is try to manage the drain water levels inside the vault. So try to keep the water out, and we always try to keep the water level when any water does get in, and back when we were operating the vaults as far as putting grout in, we try to keep it below the 8-foot level because we have these huts that are constructed up to the 8-foot level. That way, if we do get any migration from contaminated liquid out, it comes out in these huts that are contained, and we have collection trays that are at the base of the wall all the way down and sealed so that we collect that and we can clean it up so that we don't spread any contamination. And those are constantly monitored by our operations personnel. So that is the goal, is any water, try to keep the water out, try to shed the clean water away. Any water that does happen to get in, try to make sure that it comes out down into our collection trays and it's well monitored. Once again, the weather enclosures are up to 8 feet. You can see here's a picture of the inside of one. You can see the trays I was just discussing here. Once again, so we're keeping it isolated from the clean rainwater. And we have two types of coating systems inside that hut. We have a megamix coating that is a thicker concrete that when the vaults were built originally, we had a cold joint from where the walls of the vault, the clean walls, if you will, from construction, mount to the base of the vault. And so historically, we put a megamix concrete to help seal that. And then we also have the Zytex multi-polymer or multi-coating system that we will to seal the walls, once again, trying to help make sure that we don't have migration out. And then we have a drain water system operationally that we can actually, as we monitor and keep the water in the vaults, if any water does get in, we can pump it back to the process room to deal with it. So let's talk about some of the things, and this is really some of the good news from probably from the update from when we were last here. One is that we determined how we were going to deal with our making Vault 4 more stable. So we went through a process, and once again, just to remind you, last time it was operational as far as contaminated process grout from saltstone going in was back in 2012. Once again, we've disconnected those lines at this point. The current disposal operations utilize the new cylindrical STUs, new design that has enhanced features from some of the things that we've learned from Vault 4. We looked at alternatives that we could do to try to improve the situation for Vault 4. Clearly, one of them was to eliminate rainwater infiltration to Vault 4 by some of the methods that I just described, with our goal being obviously to mitigate worker and environmental risks from Vault 4. The alternative, we looked at numerous different options for how to even improve Vault 4's condition further from the measures that I described on the previous slide. And one of the key things is that we wanted to go put a better coating system, if you will, on top of the roofs. Several of the vaults in the past historically we had put a coating system on top of these 6 vaults here, or cells I should say, in Vault 4. And so part of our goal was to go address these last 6 on this side of Vault 4. And so there's a couple of ways we had to do that. Clearly, to get our workers up on top, we needed to get our rad exposure rates down for exposure control for the workers. So there's a 2-part process that we're doing currently for Vault 4. We're putting in clean cap grout, and that's so that we can get our rad rates down below the 5 MR per hour rate for the workers' exposure. And then we're applying an elastomeric roof coating on the cells. And our original plan for this year was to clean cap 3 of the cells and to coat 2 of the cells going into the year. And I'm here to report today that we've actually had a very good progress and are going to exceed that. And once again, these 6 cells that you see here previously had a very similar coating coating that had been applied to them to prevent, and once again, the goal being here, a good sealed roof that won't let water in and is proof, better durable, if you will, so that we don't have cracks develop and let water into the cells. And obviously, the other part of our program, in addition to getting this better sealed roof, if you will, is just to continue our maintenance on the weather enclosures that I described, so that any water that does end up, if it does get in, that we're able to keep it in properly contained. So today, and this is kind of the heart of today's discussion, is really where we stand against that. Once again, both SR and DOE are very committed to the stabilization of Vault 4 that we're currently doing. The project's fully funded, and happy to report today that it's ahead of schedule. As you remember, I said that we were going to clean cap 3 of these cells and coat 2 of them going into the year. Our plan originally was to clean cap J, K, and L, and to coat J and K. And so far to date this year, we have actually clean cap not 3, but we've clean cap 4. J, K, L, and Delta D cell has also been clean capped already, and we're about to start the 5th cell, Echo. We anticipate we'll start it within the next week. So where we stand is we believe we're going to total clean cap 5 this fiscal year before October 1. Once again, 4 of those are done. The 5th one's about to start. And as far as the coatings, instead of just coating 2, we are hopeful that we're going to coat 5 this year. And right now, J and K already have the new elastomeric coating on top. We're in the middle of doing Lima. It's about 50% done. That's the 3rd one we're coating for this year. We anticipate in about the next week it will finish. And then we'll move on to Delta and then move on to Echo. So if things continue to go as planned, we've saved some of the cost by not having to demote the vendor because it's been going so well. They're moving from one to the next. After they get done clean capping one, they move to the next. And once a cell's clean cap and the rates are down, they start coating it and they tag team right behind it. So once again, very good. Instead of capping 3 and coating 2, it should be 5 and 5 by the end of the year. And then the last one, that would leave us 1 for next year, which will be F or Foxtrot. And we plan to clean cap it early in fiscal 15, and then we'll coat it after it's done. So once again, the plan is in the earlier part of 15. There are some temperature limits, just so you know, when we actually do apply the coating material. You don't get clean cap right away at the beginning of the fiscal year. Not sure if the coating will happen by February 15th or just slightly after, and that'll be based on temperature conditions in the ambient. But once again, progress is going very well. All right, I'm going to move on from the Vault 4 stabilization to talk about the retention basin. Once again, just by way of background, the Vault 4 that I was just describing is in this general location. You can see the trees. You can see retention basin 4, very similar to retention basins you'd see around town, around parking lots and stores. This is where it catches our rainwater runoff, if you will. And so we've had rainwater, in essence, since we have had some problems historically with some slight contamination around Vault 4, where the rainwater has carried that from this location out to this retention basin. We have drain lines that actually carry the rainwater that comes off of this area out to this basin. That's where it collects by design. This basin is designed to basically most of the time not to discharge like you see the ones around town where water collects when you've had periods of rain, and then obviously over time it evaporates, and it's really just a temporary holding spot while you have that water to protect the environment from just runoff, just like you have around town, so you don't have water erosion, things like that. The spillway that we have, and this is a picture of the spillway when it gets to almost the overflow condition, if you will, is so that it controls it if in fact you have very large levels. This basin is designed, the original basin was designed for like 25-year rains. It just so happens, as you remember back last year in February of 2013, we had our first observed basin discharge because we exceeded a 25-year rain. When you look at the annual profiles or historical profiles, we just had a tremendous amount of rain. And because of that, we did have where we had observed discharge coming out of this basin. Because of the contamination problems I mentioned, obviously that led to some contamination coming out the spillway. This is the other side of that pipe coming out the bottom, and then obviously we have a controlled runoff path that ultimately leads to McQueen's Branch. So what we ended up with, and you can see some of the flags showing, we had some various spots of some low-level soil contamination deposited, mostly collected in the space as you can see along the runway. And so once we realized that occurred, we set in place with us in the department some aggressive actions to try to deal with that. One of the things we did is we initially installed sedimentation breaks, just like you see around town anywhere else you're seeing erosion or water flow path issues. There's a series of those erosion breaks in this pathway to minimize the contamination spread and keep it localized. And then from that, we also began doing several key things. One of the things that we did is we immediately started work, and we started right away with the planning, but we actually began work in June of this year to increase the size of the basin. Instead of a basin that holds a 25-year rain event, we expanded to one that would hold a 100-year rain event. Much, much larger. That project is going very well, and actually you see a photo here that's a few weeks old. This now has concrete all around this forms. This is now the new spillway, where the old one had a pipe that you could see, like you see on a lot of them around town, where it's kind of in the middle and it goes in. This is one that we actually raise the elevation up, and it comes off the top by about 2 feet, and that gives us another 750,000 gallons that the current basin will hold. But in addition to that, we're building a huge one right next to it that we're going to connect the two. But this new overflow, which got us some initial increase in capacity, was put in service last week. And we actually took the original overflow that I was showing you, the pipeway, and grouted that, so that's been closed off. So that part of the project's already in service. And the expansion to get to the full capacity size will finish up either late August or early September and be put in service as well. So that's been going very well. And once again, it'll finish in September, as you can see here, and we're actually tracking even a little ahead of that. We have a shot towards the end of August of being done. The other thing that we addressed is that we went to those contamination spots, soil contamination spots I mentioned, and we went and did what we, whenever we have contamination, we started cleaning up those spots. And our goal there was to do contamination remediation, clean those spots, bag that, and then put it in B12 boxes. And we completed getting all the highest spots, which was our target area initially. And so we did a significant effort. I think we filled up about 6 B12 boxes with bags of contamination that we picked up from various spots. Once again, we had localized spots, and so we just scooped them up, bagged them, and put them in the boxes. And so that still is managed as a soil contamination area. Our plan is to go back and do a more further detailed characterization of that. Now that we have routed the overflow for the Z1 overflow and established the new overflow pathway, we're gonna start that process to go do some more detailed surveys of that location. We continue as well to monitor downstream of the area that I showed you, and we continue to look at our outfall where it goes down to McQueen's Branch to our discharge point. And once again, we actually have online sampling that we do downstream of that location, and we've seen no increase or no detectable of any contamination as far as McQueen's Branch, and we continue to monitor that very closely. Alrighty, with that, I was going to open it up to any questions that you might have. Yes, sir.
Carol Simon, CAB. Could we go back to slide 9?
Sure.
Now, this basin, is that functioning as a detention pond?
We call it a retention.
Overflow?
Yes, it is a retention basin with an overflow, just like you'd see around town.
Okay.
Same design.
Now, if the water reaches a certain level, it overflows.
That's right, and what it does is it overflows. This is the pipe that's in that retention basin. This pipe is in this basin. And when it gets to that elevation, which it did last year in February 2013, the first time in that week, I think in 20 plus years, that it got that high because we had a greater than 25-year rain event. It had a slow discharge. It went into that pipe and then trickled out, coming out here, which is the Z01 discharge.
Okay, is that water contaminated?
It had contamination. We did have some contamination in that, that's correct. And that is the contamination that we put these various things in place to mitigate both these control points, if you will, to try to reduce that runoff, and also the cleanup activity that we've done along this pathway and the monitoring that we're doing.
Okay, so by the time it gets to McQueen's Branch, there's no contamination detected. How does it disappear?
Yeah, what it does is it gets caught in the soil, just like it gets trapped. It deposits, if you will, in the sediment along the way, and then we've been cleaning that up. And then we monitor the waters of the state at McQueen's Branch. We actually do online monitoring, and we've never detected any contamination there.
Okay, so you just skim the soil?
Exactly what we do. They usually do hand tools for most of it, is what they do, just like shovels, bag it, scoop it up, bag it, and put it in the box.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Earl Shepherd Cab. Kind of got a two-part question. What is the volume of that retention pond?
The original volume, I actually don't have the volumetric volume. I can get that for you. I only know what we increased it. Jim, do you?
I don't recall.
Yeah, it's designed to hold a 25-year rain event, and I will get the information back to you with that.
And what size is that discharge, and what would be the maximum discharge, just in case we got just a downpour? I'm just curious to.
Yeah, what it looks like when we had that, most of the time, this is actually at a time when the basin was very full. Most of the time when you see the basin, the water's way down. Back in February when we had the 25-year rain event, that's when the water was right up to the level. And the water that you would see coming out, this, even though the pipe is big, it's not large, you see water just trickling out the bottom. Never did you get more than just a little trickle or stream coming out the bottom. It's not like so much is going in with a heavy rain because it's so large in size that you see this pipe. It's just.
Yeah, I was thinking, you know, it's flooding out.
Yeah, no, it's like a small stream, trickle at times, and small little stream just coming out the very bottom. Yes.
Aaron Patterson, this isn't a question particularly about this site, but square concrete vaults are not unique to the Savannah River site. Do you know if the reason these leaks was endemic to these vaults, or if all those square vaults could have some kind of slight leak?
I don't think it's unique to the square vaults because it's concrete anywhere can crack, as we all see around town, etc. It's more to do with it getting in there. The roof slope design, I think we've had improvements in technology, if you will, on like the concrete and the vaults that we have and the sloping designs to better improve that as we've learned from the past.
You don't know if the rest of the complex or the rest of the industry would be worried about this.
I'm not familiar with what they're doing, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
More talent. Mike, what other radionuclides in that contaminated water?
We've seen three main things: cesium, we've seen some strontium, we've seen some technetium. Is what we've predominantly seen. Mostly cesium is what we've seen, cesium-137. Yes, sir.
Mike Lipo, I'll have to tell you that if you're using a flashlight up there, it doesn't work worth a flip. We can't see it at all.
Sorry about that.
So you know, we're just having to read and assume.
Okay.
And I'm surprised, I guess, that these soft stone disposal facilities are leaking already, and they're young. Is this something that we should be more concerned about?
Yeah, the new ones that we've been filling recently are not leaking at all.
Oh, these, well, look at all of them are young because by my standards, they're all young.
and more and more every day for mine too.
Understand that. You will find it more and more so.
Yeah, the Vault 4 has been the one that's been more problematic for us. We did not see near the issues with Vault 1. We've had some, but not Vault 4 has definitely been our problematic one.
What is the technical reason for that vault being weak?
You know, other than the construction, and I can follow up with you afterwards because I really don't know. I know that we've improved concrete technology as we've gone forward. We've applied some design features as we've gone forward from learning it, but I don't have a full answer for you, and I'll look to some of my friends in the audience if they want to add to that.
That's why you got the new design, though.
Is it connected to the in leakage that you were talking about initially?
Yeah, well, there's three ways there's water in a vault. There is water in the grout, so when new grout's being put in, you've got bleed water, and all of the vaults we have, the old and the new design, have a system that is that bleed water settles out that we then pump it back to the process room and make more grout out of it. So we have a way to retrieve that. That's one piece. There's flush water at the end of a processing day. We flush the lines to clean them out because you can't let the grout set up in the lines since we only run on certain days. That's a source of water. Same method is applied where that water is collected, and there's collection systems to pump it back. And then obviously any intrusion water. One of the things that we've done major improvements on with the vault since the original Vault 4 is the water retrieval systems that we have, so that any water that gets in the vaults from any of those three sources when they're operational, or from just rainwater once they're post-operational, that we have better systems, if you will, for pumping that water back to the process room out of the new vaults. And a lot of that was things that we learned from the first ones and applied it to the later vaults.
I guess my view as a citizen and also as a past SRS employee is that this is a problem. We ought to have worked our way around it in the design and construction.
And I think our answer to that would be respectfully that I think that we have in the new designs that we've put forward since then, implementing the things that we learned from the water retrieval system or the water system that pumps back that I just described is much better on the new vaults. And the sealing of those new vaults is also much better, that we have not been experiencing on any of the vaults we built after Vault 4, the water intrusion like we've seen on Vault 4.
But yeah, I was involved with the startup of these things, and it was a constant learning experience. And it's the first time they tried that.
Well, it would be, yeah, but
And some of it is.
a lot of things we learned about, Joe.
And well, that's why they got up to where they are
Yeah.
now with the new design. And they're gonna monitor the new design too, and they'll probably learn something about the new design.
Well,
I mean, they're making progress.
okay, but it's not comfortable for a citizen to sit and listen to a discussion. Here we're talking about a 20-year-old facility, and it's leaking already. You know, if you wanted to make a lot of stew over that, you could. You can make a lot of fuss over that
Yeah,
and lower the esteem of the people out there doing the work.
Well, I think they've been changing this over 20 years. They're changing it. The first vault we built, we had some problems with it, and they started making changes.
Joe, we have managed concrete forever. You know, for the hundreds of years. And we know that those sort of things take place. That the moisture's got to come out and got to go somewhere. And now we got a radioactive waste, as we've got here, facility, and we're letting it jump out into the ground and run down the creek. You can make an awful lot of bad publicity over there. And that's not.
This is Jim Folk.
I'm sorry.
This is Jim Folk with DOE. I think, you know, to address this, this isn't like it's a holistic failure of the concrete vault. What we found here is a very specific cause, rainwater leakages into some cracks that were identified. So we've taken what I would consider very positive steps to mitigate that. Number one, what Mike talked about was we've stopped using it. First off, we've stopped using this vault, period. We've gone in now, we've capped it, with filled it up on the inside, so there will be no more use of it, period. And then we've coated over the top. So, you know, the primary failure that we've recognized through this is rainwater inlet. We've taken every step that we can imagine to go ahead and take care of that rainwater leakage, short of an ultimate capping of the overall process once we're done. So, yeah, we found the cause, we've gone back and addressed that cause, and that's what Mike's been able to describe.
And in the subsequent designs, we've taken both improved coatings and improved water removal systems, if you will, from what we learned from 4 and applied them, and they're working very well on all the new SDUs. This man, I think.
Tom Clements of the public, follow up on that. What is the timeline for capping, and will the gutters and the weather structure, that's all going to be removed? When is that going to happen? And what's the relationship between the retention basin? Is that going to stay there even after they're capped and buried?
Yeah, we're as far as let's start with Vault 4. Like I said, we'll have all of the cells coated except for one, Foxtrot, in that picture that we were looking at, except for Foxtrot, and which is the one on the far right. All of them will be coated at the end of this year, and Foxtrot will be coated early next year.
But I mean the whole covering of the whole thing.
And eventually, as you're probably referring, eventually when we go to a permanent disposition, all these will be backfilled. But for the near term, we'll have the coatings in place, and we eventually we'll continue to maintain the huts on the side, and eventually, once we get to the point, we'll eventually start taking those huts down, but that won't be in the near term.
But capping, final capping is after the wood waste program is complete. Again, we'll be constructing the new SDUs in and around these facilities.
And with this retention, does the retention pond remain there to be used?
It does. Once again, it is for rainwater runoff, so that any rainwater in that location is designed to be collected there, and the goal normally is collected and let it evaporate from there. And hence, we're making it now bigger to do a 100-year rain. It's because we want it like all retention ponds that you see. Typically, you want them just to hold it until it evaporates. And that's
Monitor whatever might get out.
we monitor everything that gets out, as you see, both under our normal RADCON programs, and then we have our environmental programs to monitor the discharge points of the state.
And all of the retention basins will be part of the final surface closure for the area, and so they'll be part of the final cleanup and capping at that point.
Okay. Yes, sir.
You said you had cesium, strontium, and Tech 99. What kind of levels did you have? I mean, did you have a permit violation? Did you violate what's in the PA or your order? Were you over safe drinking water limit?
Once again, none got to the waters of the state, so none of that. None of it violated any permits, the PA, any of those things. The levels that we had were low levels that were underneath our RADCON program. We established a soil contamination area, and the highest that we saw, I think, was we had some spots. There were like 100,000 dpm beta gamma. We've since cleaned those up by the method I was describing earlier. And I think the highest spots now, we have some spots on some of the rocks that are like in the 2,000 to 6,000 range compared to the high of like 100,000 dpm that we saw. But all in underneath our RADCON program, if you will, nothing that's violated any of our permits. And once again, no releases to the waters of the state, all contained in the localized area, if you will, in the sediment.
And that's important. I mean, you've had a leak with very low levels and very little impact. And the soil that you did dig up and put in your B25 boxes, that went to E area, or did you?
These are going to be shipped off-site. And we put them in B12s, and we filled 6 of them so far. And I think every B12 holds about 45 cubic feet roughly in volume, just to give you some comparison. Once again, it's not like they're full of dirt. You scoop it into bags, since it is contaminated, and we put the bags in, so it's not necessarily efficient use of the space. So you pack the bags in, but I didn't want you to get the impression you have a box just completely packed full of dirt.
Are they shipped to Nevada test site, or are they shipped to Clive?
They're being shipped off-site to where that type of waste goes, and I don't off the top of my head remember where it's going. If anybody in the room does, feel free to help me. But I can get with you on that as well, get that back to the committee. Yes, ma'am.
My Angela Adams with DOE, you also worked, and we've worked along with the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control. So the overflow was reported, and they were also along with looking at the design for the new basin and then the mitigative actions to ensure that the contamination did not flow down to the Queen's Branch.
That's right. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Marilyn Parsons, CAB. I agree with some of the statements Lee made. I mean, when this kind of waste is being handled, it is so surprising that this has happened so early in the life of these vaults. And I mean, I've worked with engineers my entire professional life, and they over-engineer stuff to the point I cannot believe we're putting in this safety factor, that on one safety factor on top of another, on top of another, on top of another. And here, obviously, the basin was you never thought contamination was going to get there, or you certainly would have engineered a basin that was going to hold more than the 25-year storm. You never thought contamination was going to get there.
Yeah.
I mean, yes or no?
I think our desire is never to have contamination get to like.
Yeah. So I mean, so this has to have been a big surprise that contamination left there and got to the basin and then left the basin. So I mean, it is disturbing that this was so poorly engineered somehow. So what we'd like to know is make sure you can tell us that there aren't none of these other saltstone SDUs are like this.
Yeah, I can tell you to date, none of them are like this.
Well, but I mean, they're constructed the same?
They are constructed differently. Once again, applying the lessons learned that we've seen from Vault 4 and our past issues that we have identified. One of the ways that you have to make sure is you want a very good system that any water that does get in, both when you're in production mode, as I described, the bleed water you have to deal with, the flush water, that you can get the water out and keep the levels down in the vault so you don't have free liquid standing in your vaults. Vault 4's system was not near as good as the SDUs because we've applied a lot of those lessons learned, because we had problems with Vault 4 that some of the grout, as we were pumping that water out, that some of that sediment, if you will, was causing problems with that system. So we've done mods to Vault 4 since those days to improve it, and we've taken everything we've learned from Vault 4 and put it in the SDUs. And to date, they are both managing the water very well back to the process room and not letting the freestanding water be in the SDUs. And the coatings and the concrete structures have applied improved technologies from the things that we've seen with Vault 4, and we're not getting the intrusion. Even when they stand brand new on one of the slides that we had up here a minute ago, get back to. You see the new ones. This is 2, which we just filled up, and 3 and 5 are all pretty much empty. We periodically even monitor those and put cameras in them, even when we operate.
Pointing to the round ones?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's correct. And so we don't see any water. When we're looking at brand new empty ones, there's no water that's getting in. They're dry. Is a good example, even though they may sit there for months on end, even a year, while we wait to get ready to fill them. So we believe we obviously learned some things that we wish wouldn't have happened, but from that we've made the other ones better. Yes, sir.
Mike Lepo again, and this is I'm hoping that you're going to answer my question positively. This is the first vault to be filled?
No.
And it had not been previous vaults that were constructed and designed to the same standards that this one was designed to?
No, Vault 4 is the second vault that we had. That was Vault 1, which is right here, down in the lower portion. That's Vault 1.
Much more business. Understand?
I learned quick. I'm sometimes a little slow, but this is Vault 1. It was a very similar design. You can see it's rectangular as Vault 4 is, slightly different. We did see some issues with it, but Vault 4 definitely seems to have been our more troublesome one. And then obviously everything since that time are all the cylindrical ones, both the ones that are smaller ones you see on the screen, and then the base received for the bigger one.
We're at 2 and 3.
I'm sorry?
We're at 2 and 3.
SDU 2s, and this is 2A and 2B, and then this is SDU 3 and 3A and 5, or 3A, 3B, and 5A, 5B, and then this is SDU 6.
And are they in the process of being filled?
2 is we just finished filling 2 this year, so both of these are full. We are now filling the first one in that group of 4, which is 5 Bravo. That's the one we're currently operating to.
I'm hearing you tell me that 2 and 4 are designed to the same standards?
1 and 4 are designed to similar standards.
2 and 3?
2 and 3 and 5 are identical. It's basically identical to their design standard, and they're different from 1 and 4. As you can tell, they're cylindrical versus rectangular. And 6 is a bigger version, if you will, of both 2, 3, and 5 with some different design features as well.
The numbers don't necessarily agree with what online.
Only in our world would we not do them numeric bits. They're based on geography and some other.
One was
By
first,
far the
4
biggest-
was second.
By far the biggest change in the design is going from the rectangular, unpre-stressed concrete to the circular cylindrical design that you see there. Once the concrete walls go up and the roof goes on, then the entire structure is wrapped with on the big vault, about 17 miles of steel cable to bring the forces in on the concrete. Then when you fill it with concrete or with water, it won't crack when it expands back out. So that pre-stressing is the biggest change in the maintaining of the concrete structure.
And you did not have that in the square ones?
The rectangular
Rectangular
vaults cannot be
Right.
wrapped with steel and maintain an equal stress.
So one would assume the circular vaults are better than the rectangular, but that's not what I'm hearing.
No, that's exactly what you're hearing.
It is what it's saying.
But the cylindrical ones are much better, and they are the newer ones. 1 was built first, 4 was built second, and the others followed that.
I don't think you can argue that 1 and 4 have a combination of design and maybe construction problems, and you guys have addressed them.
And argue that. Yeah, I appreciate Mark speaking up on that. A feature I'd forgotten, just the pre-stressing that this is once again some of the improvements in both the design and the construction to avoid the cracks that you see on the new cylinder.
considered in a special analysis or as a PA update?
This is all within the scope of the PA. We're not outside the PA, so it's not like we have to revise the PA. It's all been analyzed and it's within the scope of that.
And PA is performance assessment?
Yeah, that's correct, for the control release from the facility. Any other questions? So really the story today was a good story, that we're ahead of schedule on getting Vault 4, our most troublesome vault, capped sooner so that we can keep the rainwater out. It's no longer in service. And the new vaults that we're building and filling have a lot of improved features that we learned from 4, and to date they are performing very well.
I'm sorry, Tom, just one more thing. On the Vault 1, could you explain what the roof is, that we can see the dark?
It has a, I don't remember DPD, it has a coating on it. I don't remember the exact, it's an elastomeric type coating that helps seal it and keep the water out. Does anybody remember? I can't remember if it's EPDM or what it is, but it has a covering, if you will, a coating on top of it. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. And with that, I'd like to have,
Be online.
do we have any participants?
Yeah, be online. No, Rose didn't call. Rose is supposed to call in. She's probably going to call in for nuclear material.
Oh, okay.
Maryland, I think that she'd like to, a recommendation that she'd like to go over.
Okay, the recommendation that is before us this evening is one that I wrote. The liquid waste system plan is a very important document, and I have felt like the communication on this plan has I think we need a better communication on this plan and more of a working together between DOE and particularly the Waste Management Committee. Really, the rest of the CAB depends on the Waste Management Committee to look at this plan, understand it, see what the issues they might have or concerns with the plan from year to year. And this liquid waste program is complicated, and I do think that the Department of Energy needs to work to communicate in a more effective manner with the waste, particularly the Waste Management Committee. So let me read through this, and then we can talk about it. The background, the title is Improving Public Communication and Understanding of the Liquid Waste Program and Revisions to the Liquid Waste System Plan. For many years, the Savannah Riverside Citizen Advisory Board's work plan has included an annual update on the revisions to the Liquid Waste System Plan. This Liquid Waste System Plan is a very important document as it details the activities that must be sequenced to treat and disposition the high-level waste currently in the underground storage tanks and to close the tanks. While the Liquid Waste System Plan is revised annually, it describes the planning basis for processing the liquid waste in the underground storage tanks through the end of the program mission. The development of the Liquid Waste System Plan is a joint effort between the Department of Energy Savannah River and the company that has the contract for the Liquid Waste Program, which currently is Savannah River Remediation. To fulfill the work plan, the Department of Energy or a contractor for the Liquid Waste Program has given a presentation on the revisions to the Liquid Waste System Plan to the Waste Management Committee or to the full board at one of the bi-monthly meetings. The most recent presentation was given on July 24, 2012 to the full board by a representative from Savannah River Remediation. The Liquid Waste Program is very complicated and involves many steps with many processes and utilizes many facilities. In addition, the Liquid Waste Program is subject to several laws and regulations as well as an enforceable agreement. As a result, it is difficult for members of the board and the public to comprehend the significance of the revisions in the liquid waste system plan given during a single presentation, and to have time to formulate thoughtful questions or comments at the conclusion of the presentation. This is unfortunate given the importance of the liquid waste program to the safety of workers at the Savannah River site and the citizens of South Carolina. The high-level waste in underground storage tanks has repeatedly been described by the Department of Energy and the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control as the greatest environmental risk in South Carolina. The latest revision, number 19, to the liquid waste system plan shows that enforceable milestones will be missed, which will result in delays in the treatment of the high-level waste and closure of the underground storage tanks. Not only will the risk to the public from the high-level waste continue for many years to come, the taxpayers may have to foot the bill for millions of dollars of fines if enforceable deadlines are not met. Over the years, the presentations about the annual revision to the liquid waste system plan given by the Department of Energy or its contractors have not consistently shown the same figures, tables, schematics, or bullet lists to communicate the liquid waste program and the liquid waste system plan or its revisions. In addition, the presentations have included numerous acronyms. When such a complicated presentation is given without previous discussions or copies in advance, the public is not well served. All experts that give presentations to the Savannah Riverside Citizens Advisory Board should keep in mind that by design, the Citizens Advisory Board is not a technical board. As a result, there are many members who do not have scientific or technical background. That does not mean, however, that complicated processes and issues have to be avoided. Instead, the presenters need to be able to explain complicated processes in layman's terms. For example, one does not have to be a chemist or to be given chemical formulas to understand what the outcome and importance of the actinide removal process, modular caustic solvent extraction unit, often abbreviated as ARP-MCU, is to the treatment of high-level liquid waste. A better process needs to be initiated to inform the board and the public at large about the liquid waste program and the liquid waste system plan and its revisions, the progress that is projected for the future, and the consequences of missed milestones. Recommendation. The Savannah Riverside Citizens Advisory Board recommends the Department of Energy, 1, work with the Waste Management Committee to develop a template for the annual presentation that describes the revisions to the liquid waste system plan. Specifically, at a minimum, the template should specify what diagrams, figures, tables, or schematics should be used every year and must be free of acronyms. 2, adhere to the template described above when the annual revision to the liquid waste system plan is presented to the board thereafter. Hold an information session every year with the Waste Management Committee prior to the finalization of the revision to the liquid waste system plan to highlight the changes and to answer questions that arise. This session must be done prior to any scheduled presentation to the board on the revisions of the liquid waste system plan. 4, provide an estimate of how much of an increase in the budget for the liquid waste program would be needed to meet milestones when budget shortages are responsible for delays in meeting enforceable milestones. 5, provide a printed copy of the executive summary of the annual revisions to the liquid waste system plan to the Waste Management Committee at least 1 week prior to any scheduled presentation on such revisions. 6, include links to copies of the current and past liquid waste system plan revisions on www.srs.gov homepage under the Publications and Documents drop-down tab. 7, work with the Waste Management Committee to come up with a schedule to develop the template described above. 8, work with the Waste Management Committee to develop a mutually agreeable timeline for the information schedule described above distribution of the executive summary to the final revision of the liquid waste system plan, and the annual update on the revision to the liquid waste system plan. And 9, include a presentation that describes the liquid waste program and the role of the liquid waste, and that should say system plan, not program plan, liquid waste system plan at the Citizen Advisory Board's annual education process meeting. And just one comment, at our last meeting after the presentation on the revision, which was revision 19, Rob Polk from EPA was there, and after Rob said to the CAB, you should go back and look at the other revisions, because this revision has some important differences. So when I got back home, I went to find those revisions, and they are not posted anywhere. In fact, I did a Google search, and the only thing that came up on the other revisions were presentations that had been given to the CAB, not the actual liquid waste system plan revisions. In fact, that's one thing that did come up on the web page under documents, and down at the bottom it said SRR, which you know, I knew that was Savannah River remediation. I clicked on that, and a little tab came up that said the comment period is now closed on the revisions to the Waste System Plan Revision 19. And I thought to myself, what the, I won't say it since we're online. I have been on the board for almost 6 years, and how did I miss that this plan is out for public comment? I thought, oh my gosh. So I called our wonderful staff, CAB staff, and I said, would you find out, you know, when this public comment period was out? And Lawrence Link had given me his card after the presentation and said, you know, if you have any questions, give me a call. Well, the week that I had asked this was a big week at SRS because all the big guys were in town, okay? I mean, the big guys, the secretary, and all these people were in town. So they didn't get back to me right away, rightly so, because they were doing important other stuff with the big guys that were here. So I sent an email to Lawrence Link and got a phone call back almost instantly, and he says to me, well, that plan does not go out for public comment. And I said, well, thank you, because I thought I had totally lost my mind, that I'd been on the board for 6 years and had missed that this was up for public. He said, that's an error. That should not. Of course, he wasn't happy that it said that, and that I was wondering what the deal was. So I think that's just kind of an example of we need better communication. I think what we're asking for will not be difficult for the contractor to help with us. I went back, and Mr. Ling then did send copies of 17 and 18 to me, and I went back and looked at the table of contents, looked at the executive summaries are only 2 or 3 pages long, but give all the key information so that a member of this committee and member of the CAB can look at that. It's quite readable, and it's very, they have it very standardized. I mean, the table of contents probably for years has been the thing, because why would someone want to reinvent this plan? So I think what we're asking for, I hope, is not outrageous. I think it's reasonable, and given the standardization that there is for the plan, I think we can, I want the Department of Energy to engage the board on this issue more than has happened in the last couple of years, so that we can understand. And then if, I think, I mean, I have a kind of a good example. I have a little, had gone back and looked at, what Mr. Ling had done, and he did a nice presentation. But here's the liquid waste plan, or the system. It shows the process. And here's one that I had from some years ago, okay? Now, if you compare these two, this one's very understandable, okay? This one makes your eyes glaze over because it's got too much information on it and too many acronyms. I think if people understand the basic flow of waste, where it's going to end up, and then this ARP MCU is simply to remove cesium and strontium and other actinides. That's the purpose. We have to remove that because we can't put that in the salt stone. There's a limit to how many curies can go there. Well, you don't have to be a scientist to understand that's the purpose of that. But when we have on here this ARP MCU, oh, that's where it's going through there. I mean, that's just, all of a sudden, your eyes glaze over. So I think that we can have presentations and information so that people can understand it. And then when we say we're $30 million short, and we look at this, so, well, why aren't we looking at this? Why aren't we going to be able to meet these milestones? And they can say, well, we don't have enough glass storage space, or we don't have this processing facility is not done. The public can understand that and then can take action that they want to say, well, maybe we should do something this way, or they can urge the Department of Energy, you must make this a high priority for funding. I think that the CAB and the public can then give meaningful feedback. So we need to take a complicated process, put it into layman's terms, but it doesn't mean we're not dumbing it down. I hate it when people say, well, let's dumb it down. No, we're just asking to make it so we can communicate. And then, then you can give me a presentation on the ARP MCU, because there have been improvements in that. But don't throw all of those terms at one time at a person in a presentation that they've never seen before, and then expect the CAB to give meaningful feedback. Okay?
Marilyn, can I ask you a question just to clarify? If I went online and tried to find revisions 1 to 18, and I really hadn't done this, I know I've done it some, and actually I posted revision 19 when DOE hadn't on our website. If I went to look for 1 through 18, you're saying that they're not?
That's correct. They're not online.
So the bigger question is, I can think of 2 examples, and I won't give them, that I find that DOE replaces previous documents with the current one, so you can't go back. And I'll give you one example, is for the status of environmental impact statements and EAs for NEPA documents. So you can't go back and see 6 months ago what the schedule was if it's changed, to say, oh, look, they've slipped 6 months. That's an example, because they don't post their earlier schedule. So the question is, are you aware, or is it a DOE policy not to archive so they're available earlier documents? Because I've always wondered about this. So you can't compare. Now, I don't know if it's conscious or they're just saving web space, or something, but it'd be easy to leave them up there.
Yeah.
Marilyn, can I, you raised a lot of good points in here, and I think I understand where you're going. But I boil it down to 2 things. Is one of them to try to have, if not the whole system plan, part of the system plan that is standardized and simplified more than the one that presently exists. And then the second part would be, from revision A to B, you would like to see spelled out clearly in a table or two exactly what are the changes from A to B.
Yeah, and that,
Those 2 things kind of,
yeah.
from the public's perspective.
Well, and in the executive summary, there is a table table 1, I think it's it, that shows this is revision 18, here's revision 19 here. But I almost think that you need more than just the last one. I mean, you look at 17, 18, and 19, the schedule has just each year slipped. So maybe, but see, that's something when information is presented that the CAB can ask about, okay? I see it skipped, the schedule has slipped 4 years. What was it for revision 17? It would say it was 2 more years or something. And that's, you know, what people want to understand. Yes.
Just a comment. The Governor's Council is having the same trouble trying to track back what we had done for 17 years. So we asked them if that you might want to give the CAB that graph you made for us. I think that would be a good idea. And my other suggestion is, at least for me, it's much easier. You're right. This system is the most complicated system on the site, and it is very difficult for somebody to come in cold and pick up where they last left off. For me, the best thing that DOE has ever done is take me out there multiple times, sit me down in a room and do 101 liquid waste over and over again, so that no matter how many times I hear it, not the system plan, but how the system works, I learn something. I bet I've heard it 20 times. I learn something new every time. So I think an additional suggestion might be that they do that training fairly frequently.
Okay. Yeah, I do, because we have had on our site tours, it was amazing what you learn by, you know, seeing the tank farm, seeing these structures, these facilities and these structures that are involved in the whole process is just a wonderful experience in terms of improving your understanding. So yeah, we should add something about.
I would do an annual tour, but just the tank farm.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna turn it back to Earl.
Can I just say things?
Yes.
I appreciate it. And if you don't mind, I'll stand over here. I hate up my back to everybody. But, and I appreciate, again, Jim Folk with DOE. You gave me the opportunity to look at this a little bit ahead of time. So I went back and had our staff kind of look at what's been done in the past, where we are. So I had a few general comments for you. Number one, recommendation 269, which was back in, I believe, 2010, addressed the liquid waste system plan. And in our response to that, we committed to providing 2 briefings a year. And the first one was the inputs and assumptions, and then the second one was product. What came out of it. I went back and looked at how well we performed against that. And quite frankly, the last 2 years, we did not provide an inputs and assumptions briefing for you. Now, let me also caveat this by 2 things. No excuses, okay, just giving you the facts. Number 2, when you get to a formal response to this, remember, a lot of people are going to review it. So I'm just giving you some raw data input here to consider. But quite frankly, our performance wasn't up to snuff for those 2. We did not give you the briefing for those inputs and assumptions. I went back and pulled the string a little bit more. It was a time of significant budget fluctuation, as we presented in the past, and uncertainty with SWPS schedule. Not an excuse, just a fact. So we probably did not really get to the point of being able to have all that data for you at one time, at one place, and the system just kept on going. We turned out the plan, so you saw the product. So that's data. But I would go back and look at 269 to see how some of that was worded, some of our commitments there. I think that may help address some of those issues you have. That's kind of a general comment. With your first about templates, how it's presented, sure, we can work with the committee if it helps. Remember what, and you pointed to the chart that Larry used. We use that for everybody. So I've probably used that presentation 50 times. And the nice thing about it is I can, depending on the population, I can dial that from a 5-minute presentation to a 30-minute presentation on how it goes. And I'm all with you as far as the tech side goes. I'm a nuke, I'm not a chemist, so when it comes to what's going on in the RPM2, I'm much more comfortable just explaining the ins and the outs in the product and not having to describe all the process. So we can work on presentation format and the template that would go with it. Your suggestion about providing an executive summary ahead of time, I see no problem with that. You know, as far as whether it's a month ahead, week ahead, whatever you want, we can certainly do that. I guess I would at least ask you to think about, there was a part in here about getting a briefing before it goes final. And just a general comment, personal comment, how much do you want to be part of the process? You know, again, when we look at from the development of the system plan, it's a tool. A case in point with Rev 19. One of the things that Rev 19 very clearly articulates is the importance of salt processing to the overall life cycle impact, and those immediate near-term needs I need to go do to improve that processing capability. So I'm looking now at ways to accelerate off of that. Again, I need dollars to go make all that happen, but what can I do in MCU to process more material sooner that will allow me to get more of the material ultimately out of SWPF? You know, those kind of connections. How can I accelerate SDU6 in itself to get ready in time? So it's a tool. You know, I think one of the views in the past has been, it's the final product, by golly, this is the way we're going to operate forever and ever. Well, when it suggests that performance isn't what we want, that's what we use as leverage. Where are we going to focus to try to make some improvement? So again, I really do see it as a continuous improvement effort. I don't see it as a final product that says, by golly, this is the way the future will be. And you know, I've made the analogy in the past. The weatherman goes and puts in all his data into the forecast. By golly, the hurricane is going to hit this point 0. All you can do is react. You can't change the hurricane. With the system plan, if I see that something's going south, I can go start trying to make improvements so I don't have that hurricane hitting it. So again, that's the analogy I try to make. It's a data point that now we can try to go take action on to change that future. The other part, you talk about training, tours, and that kind of thing. Typically, when we have the annual training for the new CAB members, when I look back, we have been present and presented on the liquid waste system every time except I think the last year was canceled. So again, what our recommendation would be is, because it's such a complicated system, we do that for everybody, not just new CAB members.
That education process, that is everybody.
Yeah, so how we can incorporate that into the annual training or however that works, by all means, we're more than willing to do that. So, again, in general, I don't see any issues with it. I encourage you to look at 269, see what's been done to date, and I think we can make all of this work for you. Okay.
Jim, one thing on the training, the annual training, I agree with what Karen said. I mean, it takes a lot more than a day and a half. In a day and a half, you're trying to cover a lot of stuff. I mean, the system plan alone takes a lot more than a day and a half. So, particularly if the CAB is really interested in getting into more of this stuff, it's going to take a little bit more time giving them the information, giving them back.
Absolutely. And I've offered Earl, by the way, to come out anytime, spend whatever time he wants. We'll figure it out and get everybody up to speed.
Simon, and because of the complexity of this program, it cannot be taught in one section, and you have to take it in steps, building blocks, so that new CAB members can understand the basics, and then you can move it from there. So we have to be mindful of that.
Absolutely. Whatever. Like I said, and Earl and I have had this conversation several times already. Whatever we can do to help bring up the total knowledge of the CAB, we're here to help you do that. One other comment reminded me as far as Rev 1 through 19 and what's available or not. I personally see no issue in posting all of those up. The data that Karen was referring to, we looked at specifically. I think it was from 1 to 19. What was the forecast in the program date and all the interim milestones as well? And we provided that data, so there's no hold back of that information. Quite frankly, I don't think we've been asked. There may be others have asked, but you know, it hasn't come through us as far as can we post all 1 through 19 and that kind of thing.
Do you have copies of 19 CAB that have it? They want.
Well, 19 now is posted. 19 is up and posted.
Okay.
So that is available, and you know, we typically do make a certain number of paper copies available. I'd have to refer back to the staff. Well, I don't know what the timing is, if they've all even been printed yet. So I know that at the last meeting, we were still running the printing press and getting them all up and ready. So I just don't know if we've made them available yet. But we did make
like CAB members interested in it, but put the time in. It's a lot easier to have the document in front of them.
Absolutely.
At least for me, it's that way. And most people do that.
more. I think, maybe improve this recommendation a little bit. If you could, if the recommendation could articulate to DOE exactly, I can't even articulate. Sorry. What the bottom line for the CAB is you need to know the changes over time in the system plan, how they're affecting the milestones, where are the pinch points, what's causing the pinch points, and what needs to be done to get past those pinch points. So if you could articulate what you need, what you want to get out of the system plan, that might help you. Develop the tools for you to do that.
I think recommendation there for plan is issued. Those differences are what the committee wants to look at as possible recommendations. Not necessarily you're going to have them every time, but I mean, that's the starting point to think about recommendations that the committee wants to make.
Lico, I guess when I read this thing, I was shocked. I said, what's the CAB doing if the Waste Management Committee is not up to speed on this? How come? And, I look at it and I hope that what will happen as a result of this discussion here is that this will be modified significantly, and that if you're not getting the information from DOE throughout the year, and I think it is throughout the year, that you need to be asking for it. And, but, I read this and I said, well, what's the CAB doing? They come here and they have a meeting every month, or maybe more. And I'll have to tell you, though, that the presentation system that you're using in this building is terrible. It stinks. And so you ought to change it. And you ought to get a good one. But that won't answer this question. This is one that it looks like both DOE and the Waste Management Committee is not doing their jobs. And I don't believe that. And so, I think that you need to look at it. And the one that really jumped out at me was recommendation number 1. When I read it, you are expecting DOE to work with the Waste Management Committee, and it's not happening. So that says somebody's not doing their job. Maybe both organizations. But I don't think that it's really the case. I think that everybody's trying to do the thing as best they know. And I'm sure that DOE would, if the CAB has a specific thing they want to hear about, I'm sure DOE would be tickled to death to work it out and make a presentation to that. They can't pre-guess what our knowledge is, what our understanding is, and it's been a long time since I got involved in this sort of stuff. Been retired a lifetime. But I do think that this needs significant rework before it goes public. And I think that this process we're using here needs a lot of work also. I listened to the presentation that Mike gave, and it was a good presentation, but you can't tell it from him standing over there and showing the pictures on the screen. It doesn't work. It doesn't come across. I don't know. I could see it better on a piece of paper.
Flip charts.
Flip chart. Yeah, very right. I think because the guy has the responsibility of using a pointer. He's not. It's obvious what part of that particular slide he's talking about.
Yeah.
And you can't get it up here. You don't get it in this meeting the way we're doing it. So I think everybody needs to be working to solve the problem. Identify what it is and solve it.
Yeah.
Well, can I make a comment too? I take to heart all of this, and I think the urgency of it is growing as we know that the funding is slipping more and the impacts are going to be more. So a way to keep on top of that, I'm totally supportive of that. I mean, DOE is kind of at the mercy of Congress or whatever, but it's all drifting, and a way to keep really up to date as things change. Once it's on paper, it's going to change during the year, or as Congress grinds through. But I think it is of the most important thing inside, as Karen said. So I'm very supportive of the census, for sure.
I think a lot of political pressure could be brought to the Congress people from citizens if they know what's going on.
Yeah.
And so we need to get that message across.
Okay. Everything's been duly noted and absorbed. We will continue to work on this, and we'll take Jim's and everybody else's recommendations, and we'll come back forth with it in a timely manner here. We're at a little before time, but public comment section. So, do we have anyone that would like to make a public announcement? Okay. Still nobody?
Just freely commenting.
That's good. Do we have anybody on the committee?
I'll make just a little one to follow up Tom Clements. When revision 19, I'm still not quite sure when it came out. It was unclear to me, and I think I made a request for it, and maybe it wasn't available, and then I got it electronically, but I could never decipher when it was actually publicly released. I don't know. But I think that's part of it, too. There really needs to be more definition about, at least with this document, when it's released, how it's released. It's kind of dribbled out. So, I don't know, maybe that's somewhere it's covered in the points, but, you know, DOE needs to do a news release or these updates they're sending out from Jim Juicy or something, just to make it more defined so we know the document is there and available. Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Any others? Do we have any comments from the committee? Go ahead, Hal, say something.
You really need some questions?
Yeah.
Okay, we have some way.
Yeah, all right.
What is our next tour, public tour? I mean, what is our tour of the site?
There's one planned for September, but I don't have a date yet.
So will we have the opportunity to look at some of these facilities that are key? We usually do.
Well, this one was supposed to be the more non-technical tour, for what we had discussed at the EPS, but we can possibly do that if you guys are more interested in doing that than the other stuff. It would be great if we can do a tour on the non-full board month. That would be great. It would be, because it's hard to take 2 consecutive days off, and then, but we have our own restrictions for certain days too. Yeah, that's the plan.
Okay, well, that's everything from everyone. The meeting is adjourned.
All right, new materials at 6:30.
Thank you.
That's it. Yeah, the thanks for something.
I don't.
Great.
Okay, I need to talk to Jerry about it. We have to, there's some things that aren't. It's your fault. Like that, it's ridiculous.
I'm trying to say.
That's the universal symbol for zero. I'm sorry, but you learned something today. I bet you never forget. So we'll let you guys know, Harold. I don't know right now. The response they're talking about.
That's what I was looking at.
Okay. So,
We're gonna be
yeah,
gone.
we'll look at it. I was very excited about that. It won't be that week.
Oh, yeah.
It won't be that week.
I don't understand why you can't use.
There should be 3 terrible rains coming.
Okay.
You know, overhead, there's like 3 workers, everybody's got to work on it.
Luckily, it has to be at that.
That's great.
Waiting now.
have the round thing?
Yeah, it was about 20 minutes ago. I
Trays.
just wanted to be younger. We're
Remember the
99.
slide tray? Individual little.
I think I Melly with the Citizen Advisory Board. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Marilyn Parson, CAB.
Harold Simon, CAB.
And is Rose the only person that's online or on the phone? Is that everyone? Okay. So I just want to encourage everyone to participate. Anyone who would like to is more than welcome to sit at the table. Anyone wishing to answer questions or talk about anything doesn't have to sign up today, but just want to come up to the podium, that would be fantastic. Nuclear Materials currently has one open recommendation, and we've got 2 pending recommendations. The open one is 307, transfer materials in L basin to auxiliary dry cask storage. And I think at this point, as we discussed in the full board meeting, we're keeping that one open at this point. The 2 pending ones are still 319 and 320. So we have a position paper to discuss. I don't know if you want to do that. Since we don't have any open recommendations, could we talk about the draft position paper now in this? Oh, I guess we really don't have the time, do we?
Designated after the presenter.
Okay. Okay, so we have one presenter. Tonight we have Alan Gunter for our K area update, but I think our paper said Patrick McGuire. So it's one or 2 of you.
Actually, it's a third. We got to, we're really switching people up on it. I know. We got the third string here.
Okay, so the third person,
Jay Ray.
will be coming and giving us an update on K area.
We just wanted to be chief to work for the government. So you ready?
Y'all are ready, I'm good.
All right.
Jay, do you want to do your slide?
I can probably. Use the laser.
The pointer's a little green. Yeah.
Although I've been requested not to use the laser and use the, we have a pointer? Finger, that'll work. Well, use this.
He's not here.
Well, there's one on here, I think. Oh,
It has the pointer that's like, the serious pointer.
serious. Is there a laser on here though?
Yes, push the green button.
It's a megawatt. Ah, okay. But I will try to refrain, okay? So I am neither Rose Hayes, I am not Pat McGuire, and I am not Alan Gunter. Alan is at the beach and having a great time. So my time's coming up in 2 weeks. So if you like my presentation tonight, my boss is sitting right there in the orange shirt, and say, you know, that Jay Ray is such a nice man. You know, please give him a week off. All righty. Alan generally is the one that provides the presentation. And okay, I think I knew the buttons on here. Like I said, Alan. Oh, somebody put my name on there. Wow, I feel so special. What's that? Oh, okay. So Alan generally gives this presentation at least once a year, kind of an update on where we're at with K area, and I'll get into some of the specifics. But this is where we have our plutonium stored, and we also have some uranium that is stored in the K area facility. So the purpose is to update you on what's going on in K area and with the plutonium storage and the surveillances that we have going on inside the facility that ensure that we have long-term viability for the containers that we have there. The next slide is one that should be familiar to you. That's your own slide, and we are going to, of course, talk about K area right here in the green circle. And a few acronyms for anybody that's new. Some of those may not be familiar. Of course, International Atomic Energy Agency, they're in Vienna. Lionel is in New Mexico. And Lawrence Livermore is out in California. And we do a lot of work with Lawrence Livermore. You'll see later on in the presentation. Of course, TU's plutonium.
Rocky Flats Environmental Technology site is one of the sites that a large amount of our plutonium came from, as well as Lawrence Livermore and Landell to a smaller degree. We also have material from Hanford, and of course, Savannah River site, SRS. Alrighty, some important dates for the plutonium consolidation. In 1998, the department decided to consolidate the non-pit plutonium, so plutonium not from weapons, from various sites to the Savannah River site. And as I mentioned, we got a large amount from Rocky Flats and Hanford, and smaller amounts from Los Alamos and Lawrence Livermore. Rocky Flats is near Denver, Colorado, and of course Hanford site is out near is in Washington State. And then also in 1998, the department decided to convert the K reactor to a plutonium storage facility. We had 5 reactor sites at the Savannah River site, K area being one of those. We put a lot of effort into turning that into a storage facility. And now this says 2001, but we think the date is really 2002. The department approved the consolidation at that time of only the Rocky Flats material to the Savannah River site, and then in 2007 approved the consolidation of the other material. And I want to point out that the consolidation is not yet complete. We do have an amount of plutonium that is actually under the IAEA. Initially, there was material from Rocky Flats, then we added material from Hanford, and then ended up adding some additional material under IAEA. And the actual unclassified number is approximately 2.8 metric tons. The next slide is during the conversion of the K reactor facility into a storage facility, and that portion there is called the K area material storage, or CAM, as you might hear or have heard. And this area right here is actually where the reactor was underneath, and this is what they commonly call the forest, which is where all the control rods were positioned. And that's a shot back at 2000 of the idle stone. And this picture was taken in 2009 as a portion of CAM, and kind of a close-in. It's probably 5 to 10% of the facility there you see in the picture. Now, most of the material that is stored in K area is stored in a 9975, and it's about I think it's either a 55 or a 30-gallon drum. Who remembers? 55-gallon drum, stainless steel. And on the next slide, there's a cutaway view of that. But the two things here to point out is this is a 3013 container, which is the primary storage vehicle for plutonium in K area. And the cutaway has more details there, but that, as you can see, weighs about 30 pounds. So with the plutonium that's in there, plus the inconvenience can, we like to call it, or screw lid can in some instances, and then around that is an outer 3013 container and then an inner 3013 container. All of this makes up a 3013 storage package. And that is actually sitting inside of a 9975 drum, and then there are some added containers that go around this and that. You'll see that on the next slide. Here we go. Set this down for a second. So out here you can see the drum. This is a kind of an impact limiting, material on the outside, a very light material.
Silicate.
Yeah, Silicate. And
DEL. That's totally wrong. It's
OTEX, or ATEX. And it's used in other packages too. So this is a part of the storage structure on the outside here. And then what you have at the very top here is the top of what they call the secondary container vessel. And then you have some impact limiting material at the top here, which is a very light, sometimes made out of aluminum or stainless steel, kind of almost like a corrugated material, but it's made out of metal. And then you have inside of that what we call the primary container vessel, and you can see the very top here. And it's also hard to see, but there are actually test ports at the top here. This item right here is a spacer. And then this part, I am going to use the laser, but that part right there is actually the top of the outer 3013. And then if you can see it, inside of that is the very top, and it's kind of a very wide U shape. That is the inner 3013. And then what you have here, which would have plutonium in it, is the screw-lid container. So the first material that the plutonium sees is this screw-lid container, and then you would put that in a inner 3013. You would make sure it's decontaminated. You would weld that. Then you would make sure the outside of that is decontaminated, if there's any contamination. And then you would put that into the outer 3013. That thing gets welded also. That thing gets put into the primary container vessel, which is then pressure tested, and then that gets put into the secondary container vessel, which is pressure tested. And everything is assembled, bolted to particular specifications. And so that makes up a 9975 package. And you could actually have different packages that go into a 9975. You wouldn't necessarily have to use a 3013, but the configuration that we have in K area, that's typically what the material is stored in. I think we'll have plenty of time at the end if you have questions. So the department, DOE, EM, working with NNSA, foresaw that we might need to expand the storage capacity of K area. And initially we had around 5,000 to 6,000 positions, depending on how tightly you packed them in there and how high. Decision was then made in 10 to expand the area. Phase 1 was completed in June of 2012, and then phase 2 is fairly construction complete, and that should be operational in 2014. And of course, the note at the bottom, that adds about another 2,500 storage positions. Okay, the surveillance program, which is very important to the 50-year, nominal 50-year storage analysis that was done and design of the 3013 containers. We have a surveillance program, and LANL is also, Los Alamos is also a key part of this, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But between us and LANL, there is a program that makes sure that we're not seeing any adverse conditions that would challenge that 50-year storage design. So beginning in 2005, we started doing non-destructive examinations. That's the NDE parts that you see up here. We were doing initially about 40 of those per year, and that consisted of us taking the containers and doing a visual examination of the outside of the 3013 container. You were looking for bulging, maybe of the can, or anything that just looked unusual. And there's actually built into the top of the 3013 container, and I didn't bring an example, but there's a little flat piece that's welded right in the center, and then the entire container is machined off flat. If you take that container at the side, if there's any pressure buildup inside those containers, you should see that little pillow area in the very center of the top of the 3013. You should see that deflect and actually come up. So that was one of the things that you would look at when you're doing the non-destructive examination. We did those for several years, and then we determined that we didn't need to do any more NDEs other than those that we did in conjunction with a destructive examination. So we have continued doing destructive examinations in the years since around 2005. So we nominally we were doing about 15 a year. Currently we're performing about 9 per year. And those began in 2007. So we continue to do the destructives, and as you might guess, you actually cut the containers open, dump the oxide out, send a sample of the oxide up to Savannah River Lab. And at one time we were also sending off gas samples, and then we also send the containers up there, and if they do a visual examination of the containers outside and also on the inside, we're looking for corrosion pitting of the stainless steel. And again, the idea is to make sure that there's nothing going on with that material or the containers that would compromise that 50-year storage container life. And then at the bottom, there's a little note that says that we do this in conjunction with Los Alamos. So they have some material out there. They have representative samples of all of the plutonium that we have in storage in K area, and in conjunction with us, they analyze the material also for long-term storage and anything that might compromise that storage 50-year envelope. This is the same inner container that I pointed to when I was looking at the cross-section of the 9975. That's a screw-lid container. The lid has been removed, and you can see the threads on the container there. And that inside is actually plutonium oxide, that brown, orangey looking material there. Now, let's see if I have anything else I want to point out. No. Okay, next slide is, and I should have actually gone to this one first. First, you have to cut open the outer and inner 3013 cans to get to this. So if we reorder the slides, I would put that one first, show you how those are cut open, then show you that, which has the product in it. And then that's actually plutonium oxide that has been placed into a pan inside of a glove box. Okay, some surveillance results that we've seen since 2005, 2007 time frame. The maximum design pressure for the 3013 container is almost 700 psi, and to date we have not seen anything above 20 psi. We have seen no flammable gas mixtures, either hydrogen with no oxygen. We have seen some small amount of corrosion on the inside of the convenience can or the screw-lid container, and but usually that is in the gas space or the very top of the container, or where the oxide actually contacts, and I believe it's at the top of the container where it interacts with the convenience can itself. We've seen minimal corrosion in the inner can around the weld area. And the surveillance program, as I mentioned, has not identified any conditions that would challenge that 50-year storage life. And we plan to continue performing the destructive examinations. and continue working with Flannel to validate the storage line. So in summary, plutonium is being safely stored in K area. Savannah River continues to evaluate storage conditions of the material, and we of course have experienced staff and a facility to handle that plutonium that is stored there, along with the uranium also, I'll point out. Any questions?
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, Rose.
Go ahead, Rose.
Is that, oh, okay. First of all, did I understand, I'm sorry, but the audio here isn't great. I'm on the highway. Did I understand you to say that consolidation is not complete? And if that's correct, when is it scheduled to be complete? And how much more material is coming into SRS? Secondly, it seems like no matter what's being tested, whether it's the L Basin, whether it's the Kansas DWP or 3013th and K area, safe storage life always comes out to be 50 years. Where does that 50 come from? I mean, how is it tested and demonstrated? And how can you make it specific for 3013 cans in K area?
Okay, let me take the first one first. Nice try, but I can't tell you when consolidation would be complete. There's a classification issue, and all the decisions that lead up to that have not been made yet. But and you had a
how much more material is coming in?
We can't say that either from a classification viewpoint.
But there's going to be 2,500 more spaces, so I'm assuming 2,500 more cans.
Up to potentially. Now, right now, we're just authorized on that 12.8 metric tons, and so that's the consolidation that I'm talking about is that 12.8 metric tons. Pat can interrupt me if I'm wrong, but so far that's what we're looking at. The decisions to add more material have not been made yet, but we are still consolidating that original 12.8 metric tons.
And then the 50-year question. And is it assumed that it's going to be 50 years before it's moved out of there?
Well, they picked a much longer time frame than they thought that we would see. So the 50 years was picked and should be suitable to be able to get the material out of K area prior to that.
And how do you test and demonstrate and come up with this 50-year safe life? And then how is it made specific to K area cans?
Okay. Well, let me give you an example. So one of the criteria that was looked at for the 3013 cans was how thin could the can get and still contain that 699 psi pressure. So they evaluate, as I pointed out earlier, they were evaluating the pitting and corrosion issues they see on the 3013 cans, and they know what thickness of the 3013 is still available to contain the theoretical pressure of the 699. Now, as I also pointed out, we haven't seen any cans that have exceeded 20 psi. So we're well within that pressure envelope, and we're well within that thickness that we need to protect those cans. So that's just one example of the design criteria that went into the development of that 50-year storage life. Does that help?
So where does the 50-year come from? It keeps coming up. No matter what it is they're talking about, it's always 50 years.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that was a number of years that was chosen that we felt would more than be long enough before the material in K area would be dispositioned. So let's say that we get material in 2015, next year. you know, well before 2065, well before 2065, that material would be dispositioned. So we picked a storage life that would well exceed what we felt was a reasonable time.
Yeah, and Rose, this is
when was that picked? How long has it been?
Back probably around 2000 to 2005 time frame. Well, the consolidation decision was when did I say? 1998. And so, yeah, at some point after that is when we started looking at what the 3013 container storage would look like and the design of that container. And Alan was very involved in that.
And just some additional information. There is a DOE standard by which all this material has been packaged. And so the standard contains the criteria by which the material has to be so dry, has to have so little other constituents and contaminants in there. So what was packaged in accordance with this standard, the government standard, to meet very strict requirements. In 50 years, you're correct. The L Basin has been evaluated by the National Lab to last an additional 50 years. Glassway storage building designed to last 50 years. So again, it's an engineering judgment. It could have been 60 years. It could have been 25 years. Okay, it's just a point from which engineering analysis can be done. So it does not mean that after 50 years, all of a sudden, these containers are no longer storage or robust, or they're corroded or things. It's just a time frame from which an analysis can be done. So it's, as Jay said, we believe it's sufficient enough until the material is finally dispositioned to wherever it's going, whether it be the fuel in the basin, whether it be the vitrified glass blocks in the glassway storage buildings, or these plutonium containers. So again, 50 years, it's just a good engineering judgment by which a date can be picked such that we can do analysis. So to answer your question, there's very strict criteria by which the various sites had to package this plutonium to meet this standard. And we're just validating that the material was packaged correctly, and we're not seeing anything abnormal from which the standard has made assumptions in the very beginning.
Well, Pat, the reason that I've asked this question a number of times is because, first of all, of course, the CAB is concerned about the safety and storage at SRS, as I know all of you are. But secondly, it's to stay at SRS until it goes to an available repository that the government now says will be available around 2048. That repository, if we've understood correctly, is to be the permanent disposal site. If these cans are going to be safe for 50 years, what happens to them once they're stacked in a permanent repository? How long is it going to be before they're breached and you have a repository, something like WIP, with radioactive materials floating around?
A couple points. Right now, the disposition path for this plutonium is it's varied, and the final decisions haven't been made. But part of this is some of the plutonium oxide that you saw, that orangish, brownish material, that right now has been blended with inert material and shipped to WIP. So that type oxide powdery stuff gets mixed with an inert material, and so we have successfully shipped some of that material to WIP. So it's not going to a federal repository yet to be named. It has a final destination. Now the surplus, and I'm going to mess up this acronym, but the supplemental surplus plutonium environmental impact statement, something of that nature, the one that NNSA is doing, is looking at a variety of different options for the final disposition of plutonium. But right now, the disposition options are either going to WIP, which we've demonstrated that, dissolving that material in H Canyon and sending liquid material to the liquid waste system. We have done that, but we basically stopped that. And then the final disposition path is providing that plutonium for the mixed oxide fuel fabrication facility. So right now, the plutonium disposition mission is not directly linked to a Yucca Mountain. There was never any intent to directly ship a 9975 container to Yucca Mountain or any other deep geological repository. I'm not saying.
And what about the portion that goes over to DWPF?
Pardon me?
What about the portion that goes over to DWPF?
As I said, we used to do that. We used to dissolve that and transfer that liquid plutonium material over to the liquid tank farms. We're no longer doing that. It's still an option.
Oh.
It's still an option in the environmental impact statement that says we could resume that. But again, that decision hasn't been made from an environmental standpoint. Again, from plutonium, the amount that we sent over there before, very small amount compared to the number of canisters that would be produced just from the large inventory of the liquid waste they already have.
But if I understand what we've said, if a portion does go over to DWPF or things change and any portion does get scheduled for the final destination of the geologic repository, the 50-year safe storage life that covers this material right now does not convey to the repository. We don't know how long the containers will be safe in a permanent repository.
Yeah, the material's not going to go over in these 3013 containers. It goes over in a liquid form, and then just like any other high-level waste, it's processed through the Defense Waste Processing Facility, and it goes into glass logs. So it's a completely separate container. It goes into those, 10-foot tall, 2-foot diameter stainless steel containers, and those eventually will go to a repository. And those are designed to go into a repository, forever.
And is there a 50-year storage life, safe storage life designed for those, or how long are the cans from DWPF supposed to be safe in a permanent repository?
Forever. Okay, so again, until the repository's built and running, but it was designed to the Yucca Mountain specifications at the time. The glass waste storage building on site was designed to a 50-year life, okay? Again, just from an engineering evaluation, so calculations can be done. That doesn't mean it could not be sufficient to safely store material for 100 years or whatever, but the stainless steel DWPF canisters were designed to meet the criteria of Yucca Mountain, and eventually, nothing lasts forever, but the glass form, which is where the plutonium and high-level waste is bound up into a glass matrix, and the technology best known to man today, that is what binds all that high-level waste, plutonium, other fissile materials, is in that glass matrix that will be in Yucca Mountain or whatever federal repository will eventually be done. So the stainless steel container, well, that's just kind of a convenience mechanism to get it from point A to the federal repository. The glass matrix is really what holds all that stuff together. So that water infiltration or earthquakes or whatever, it's all bound up into a glass matrix.
Well, but could I walk up to one of those glass logs without the can and stand there and be safe?
No. Due to the radiation. Due to the radiation emitted off that material.
So we will have a repository full of them, and we don't know for sure what the safe storage life will be.
I don't understand what you're asking. Safe?
Well, I don't see the point in having a repository if the materials inside the repository could be released from their containers so that the environment of the repository is highly radioactive.
Oh, the repository.
Because it could leak into the environment.
Okay, two different comments. A little bit about radiation and then contamination. Okay, just some basic fundamentals. The glass canisters, and I'll just talk about the glass, will be emitting radiation. Okay, radiation is energy, and that could be harmful to people. You can have shielding, lead or hydrogen or other things that can shield that radiation, that energy from getting to a person, and it could be very safe. If this was a lead wall, I could be standing on the other side and the radiation is shielded so it won't affect me. I will have zero effect on my body. So when it's in glass waste storage building or it's in Yucca Mountain, people are not planned to go into the repository being next to this material. There's hazardous. It's giving off energy. However, to the environment, that radioactive material is bound up into a glass matrix. Therefore, there's really no mechanism to contaminate soil, groundwater, or other things. It will not permeate, will not leach out of that glass into the environment. Radiation energy will always be given off that material until a succession of half-lives until that radiation decays. And so there's two different things. Energy giving off by that material, which is why you wouldn't stand next to spent fuel or plutonium or glass waste, because that energy is being given off. But there's no risk to getting into the groundwater because it's bound up into that matrix. So from a contamination standpoint, in a geological repository, it will always be giving off energy. That's part of the physics of the radioactive decay. The contamination to get into the environment, very little chance, and that's what the design criteria and waste acceptance criteria of whether it be Yucca Mountain or something else in the future. And just
except that future societies that don't understand what's there could accidentally or on purpose access that repository.
And again, I understand that, generations in the future, you've said it before with the pyramids and the Egyptians and all that stuff, societies do decay. But one of the fundamental principles is that whatever federal repository is built, constructed, designed in the future will always remain under, government, federal, controls and perpetuity. Are we ever that will always be in effect? I don't know. I'm not a philosophizer or a political scientist or whatever, so I'm not going to get into those details. Tom has
all right. We're going to agree to disagree on this one, Pat.
Okay.
And just before Tom asks, just to make sure, like the glass waste storage building, the 50-year life is not the containers. It's the building that's storing the containers. And the same thing, 3013 containers, 50-year storage life, but the ultimate disposition of that material in whatever form is for a much longer period of time. So, Tom?
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, this is Joe Ortaldo. Just follow up on one point that Pat said. You're concerned about standing next to a canister. You're worried about gamma radiation in that particular case. Now, a lot of that comes from the cesium, and the cesium half-life is about 30 years. And in about 300 years, almost all that cesium is going to be gone. So that kind of radiation that you're worried about there, the gamma, the X-ray stuff, that's going to be gone in a relatively short period of time as far as civilization is concerned. There's other things in there, the actinides that have a lot longer half-life. They're going to be around for a lot longer, and then you're concerned about what happens 1,000 or 2,000 years from now. There is some valid thing, but Pat kind of addressed that, about trying to address that by administrative controls. If society falls apart completely, and people are out there digging around in this stuff, there's a lot of other places around that are worse than that. I mean, coal ash pits, coal burning power plants, things like that. You can go down the list, and it's as long as your arm.
Tom's been so patient.
Tom from Savannah Riverside Watch. I had a few questions. First, Rose, it might have been more interesting if you asked what the lifespan of a container is in the WIP facility. But anyway, we won't get into that right now. First question about CAMs. What is the amount of gap plutonium that's stored in CAM from such countries as Sweden, Belgium, Italy, for example? What's the...
Yeah, you want to take that? What can we say?
Yeah, we can't comment on that.
Well, it's like a cat on a hot tin roof on that one. I don't understand. Why can't it be revealed how much plutonium is coming in of particularly non-U.S. origin from commercial plutonium?
We're just not able to disclose just due to security reasons.
It's more for political reasons, though, isn't it?
I would say for security reasons, we're not able to disclose that.
Okay, when will the NEPA analysis be done on the possible return of U.S. origin plutonium now stored in Japan? What's the timeline on that, do you know?
No, I do not.
Okay, good. A few more questions if I might. Are there any plans under discussion for storing actually weapon pits in the CAMS facility as is now perceived?
No.
Okay. How many glove boxes are there currently in the K area interim surveillance?
There's one glove box line, I believe.
Okay, and what's the plan for installing another or more glove box lines in order to pack plutonium into the pipe overpack containers for WIP, and what's the timeline for that?
You know that we did that in HV line, and we're moving that capability to K area as planned. We're probably going to have to do that as a line item, and so the earliest we could start would be FY16 or 17, and it would take a couple of years, maybe 3 years, to actually install that. This is all kind of preliminary, but it's several years off before we would have that capability.
And it's just one additional glove box one?
We're looking at 1, 2, or possibly 3. I think we envision maybe a maximum of 3 just because of space consideration.
Okay, and final question, if I might. You're doing 60% of the destructive examination that you had been doing earlier. So that raises, so I know Los Alamos is doing its monitoring program, that raises some concern. Why was it originally 15 or whatever containers, and now you're doing 9 per year? Well, last year, there might not have been any done.
Yeah, we waited 3 years.
Criteria, and why have they changed? Thank you.
Well, there's a committee that oversees this, and it's the MIS committee, and somebody remember what that stands for?
Material identification and surveillance.
Thank you, Jeff. What he said. So that's a committee that looks at this program. Now, initially, we waited a few years, 3 years, as the slide said, to actually begin doing destructive examinations. And of course, until we opened the first 1 or the first 10 or the first 20, 30, we felt like we knew what we would find, but we, of course, weren't exactly sure. But what we've seen so far has been very minimal, corrosion or any damage to the containers. So our confidence now has increased that we can, with lower number of DEs, still ascertain the storage, the safe storage of this material by doing less numbers per year.
I just had one question, which seems very simple after all the other ones. So on slide 16 about the corrosion seen on the can, are there any long-term studies on what the effects of that corrosion? Are they seen anywhere else?
Slide 15 or?
16.
16, okay.
It's like third bullet, some corrosion on the convenience can.
So ask the question again.
So are there any long-term studies about, does this grow? Is this just sort of contained as other areas?
Of course, if you open 2 cans and you compare them, you've destroyed each one as you open it up, and then you stop the corrosion of that material interacting with the container itself. But as you open up more and more cans, if there were a trend, say where you saw, the first year you saw some, the next year a lot, and the third year, fourth year even more and more and more, then you could say, okay, there's a trend, we're continuing to eat more and more, corrode more and more of the containers. But the corrosion is extremely slight. So it's not that you're seeing a large amount of corrosion on these cans over time. Now, I think Flannel has a longer term, I think they have coupons out there, you know, small pieces of stainless steel, the same material that these cans are made from, that they've exposed to the same amount of plutonium over a longer period of time to also look at the effect long term of actually that plutonium being in contact. So, like I said, in our program, we stop the corrosion of the materials, we take the plutonium out of it. But there are programs out of Flannel that are looking at also those long-term effects. But any long-term effects, I think we would see that with the additional DEs, the destructive examinations that we do every year. So we would see a long-term trend.
Y'all have any before?
Jay, it's Joe Orsaldo. Did they have any idea what the mechanism of that corrosion is? I mean, is it moisture or what is it exactly?
Well, of course, you know, Pat talked about all the things that go into that standard, and actually the 3013 number is actually the standard. So it's DOE-STD-3013. So that's a DOE standard, as Pat said. So in that standard, it said your moisture content of your plutonium had to be such amount, okay? The constituents other than plutonium could not exceed a certain amount. So,
Hang on. US 82 class.
Are you driving?
okay.
Yeah, she's
I think
driving.
she said she was.
He's
So,
in your direction. Nothing to see you. Marilyn, did you have a follow-up question?
well, yeah, so anyway, where did I think.
So what I'm trying to, does the metallurgist have any idea is it moisture, and should the moisture be changed, or what's causing the corrosion, and should anything be changed?
Well, I think certainly you got to have probably some moisture there to have the corrosion probably. I mean, you could also have, in some materials, probably not with stainless steel, but with some aluminum, you could have a spalling of the alpha actually bombarding the container. In this case, that would be what's going on, but it would be the moisture content of the material. Now, you could lower the moisture, but it would take a different preparation of the material itself. I think it's much less than half a weight percent water, but you have to have the water. There could be some small, what's the word I'm looking for? Contaminations in there that are together with the moisture are leading to that.
Well,
I'm not a metallurgist, but I'm sure somebody
looking at what the mechanism is.
Yeah, they are.
And if you wanted to extend to 50 years, you might want to drop the moisture down if that's what's causing the corrosion.
Yeah.
Whatever the cause of the corrosion is, then you want to extend the life longer for some reason. Maybe look at your specs to say I should make that stuff less, whatever it is.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yes.
This is Lee Bo. I have a comment. I'm sitting here listening to this. The story is good. It ought to be documented.
You mean as far as the surveillances that are done? And oh, they are. Oh, yes.
Can I get a copy of it? Give me a copy, please. If you don't have it, if I can't get a copy, it's not there. I think it's an excellent opportunity for DOE to come out and show why what they're doing is the right thing to do, is safe and is secure. And I think there are a lot of people that take on face value what you tell us. That's good, sounds good, but I think you've got the story there at Livermore and Los Alamos, wherever they're doing this R&D, and they ought to document what they know today.
And yeah, Pat McCarr with you. We have the results. Lee addresses your concerns. It documents the results we've seen from the gas sampling, from the corrosion, and Joe, it also, these reports address some of those corrosion mechanisms, what is causing this. But again, everything that we have found to date confirm that there's no challenge to the 50-year life.
And so it does give us confidence that we can continue to safely store. We'll get those. Don't know what's the best mechanism to place them or make them available to the public, whether it's on the CAB website or something like that. We'll work with the CAB support team to see what's the best mechanism to make those things available. But they are documented. I mean, we want them. Our headquarters counterpart wants them. We have to convey that to the Defense Board, to the MIS team. So all these really smart people want to see the results. We don't just do them just to keep the people busy at work. So we have those results, and we'll see what's the best way to convey that information to the public so they can see that for themselves.
Yeah, certainly we just wouldn't want to put that information out there because
I think the benefit of having a
good amount of explanation that would need to accompany it.
The benefit of having it documented is it allows you to show why it's what you expected it to be, and you can't convince us without it.
See, Lee, this is Jeff Hamilton here. I want to point out that this information has been regularly provided at the scientific forums, and there was an entire quarterly copy of the Journal of Nuclear Materials Management a couple of years ago that was devoted just to this program. I'll get to you the reference.
Well, that's good. That makes a lot of sense. But I tell you what, public here hadn't seen it, and we are asking to. The 50-year life is confusing to begin with, and I think I understand that it's not a real limit, but it's just what people thought was a good engineering judgment to start with.
And I think what Jeff is saying, though, is that some of that information is available, so publicly available. So
then it ought to be available through the CAB, right?
I would agree. I think we should be able to do that. So
let me clarify where the 50 years originally came from. When the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board came out with recommendation 94-1, they said some of the leftover materials it was not certain were in vulnerable forms for long-term storage. That recommendation said that DOE needed to develop a long-term storage standard for plutonium, and that became defined to be at least 50 years. So that's just how that came about. And what they're measuring to that is whether they believe that you indeed can reach 50 years or more, but it was really based on the founding purposes for writing that DOE standard, DOE STD 3013.
That's wonderful. And I think it ought to be, but that information ought to be made available to the citizenry around and about. I'm not worried about it personally because I think it's plutonium in the form that it's in is stable. But there are people who don't have that same opinion, don't have the same background and whatever it is. So it ought to be documented, and it ought to be come out not in a real deep technical report, but in one that the public can see and understand.
We can do our best to try to convey it in a manner that would
That's hard.
understandable.
That's hard.
Especially for engineers.
Well, do y'all have any other follow-up before we move on to the draft? Oh, you've still been waiting. What? I didn't realize you'd still been waiting. Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a question on the surveillance program, okay? Now, this surveillance program that was approved in 2003 was relative to the materials that were presently stored in 2003.
Well, that we're planning to be stored. I don't think we began storing until 2000.
Yeah, the surveillance program, to some degree, again, Pamquire with DOE, you have to let the material cook, if you will, in a container. If you just put plutonium in a container and you do a surveillance the next day, it's really not going to tell you anything. Right. So some of the surveillances were, especially destructive, designed such that you would not do any surveillances of that material for at least, I think, 5 years from the date from which it was packaged. Because you need to let, if there's any corrosion, to let that occur. If there's any gas generation, to allow it to occur. And so that's kind of how it was set up while the standard was developed so that people could package the material. The surveillances program was developed to allow whatever could go wrong to begin going wrong, so then we can make adjustments if necessary. The non-destructive evaluations, we can do those, the next day to make sure O-rings are sealed right, that there's no damage to the exterior of the container, that we do radiographic evaluations of those also, so we can put them in a X-ray machine, if you will, and look to see if there's anything abnormal going on with the container itself. So you could do those at any point in time also. I think we started doing the non-destructive maybe 3 years, a couple years out.
That's 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, but my question is, all right, so if we, as new materials are brought in, then this surveillance program, if it was packaged, and then 3 years after. But that's not what, it doesn't sound like that from what this
slide are you on?
I'm looking at slide 12. You said there are no more non-destructive exams going to be done.
Well, we did 2 examinations. We picked some containers and did the non-destructive examination. We picked other containers to do the destructive examination. And on those, we also did non-destructive examinations. So we had some that we cut apart and fully examined. Others we just looked at, said, okay, they're good. As Pat said, we did radiographs on some. Then we put them back on the shelf or back in the 99.
But that's not my question. My question is, okay.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
So what we did is we stopped just doing the non-destructive examinations by themselves. We said, okay, we now have enough data collected on the destructive examinations and non-destructive examinations to drop the non-destructive examination only part. So now when we take a can and we're going to do a destructive examination, we do a lot of those same things that we were doing for the non-destructive examination. So when we say we're doing a destructive examination, we're also doing a non-destructive examination on those containers.
Yeah, but that's not my question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
My question is, materials that are going to, you've said that not all the materials are here,
right?
Correct?
Oh, so okay, so
yes,
example,
my question is, yes.
This year,
yes.
What do we do?
Yes, that's my question.
Some of those containers over the years would be opened destructively to examine them. But like Pat said,
but, okay, so anything in the future, if they're in these same kind of containers and the same kind of plutonium oxide, there will only be, well, basically you're going to do the destructive 5 years after packaging. So I guess...
Yeah, a few years after it's packaged, then it's suitable for opening up to examine and see what's happened in those few years since it's been packaged.
So it's somewhat of a
It's
statistical analysis. Okay, so the goal of the whole program is to give the department, I think it's 95% confidence or 90% confidence that if there was anything to go wrong in this pool of containers, whether it be 2,000, 5,000, 6,000,
when they came in.
regardless of whenever they came in, that we would sample enough of them that we would have a high degree of confidence that we would identify any problem container so that we could address it. That is a statistical sample
but
size.
It's not, I mean, it's not based on, you don't sample, when these came in, there's not a different, those aren't randomly sampled. And then let's say this coming year you get a bunch in and then you don't do a random sample on that batch, you're doing sample on the entire inventory?
To some degree, yes and no, and there's the MIS team, who's that body of experts, looks at where the material came from, and the different constituents, and say dryness, the level of contamination types of things that were in there, and they make engineering evaluations that says, I'll go get this one and this one and this one. This one came from Rocky Flats. These two came from Hampton.
Based on specific origins and all that stuff.
Yes, very scientifically driven.
And also randomly chosen.
That's what I had said, random.
Typically, they say, we want to look at this can that came from Rocky Flats because whatever. And then they're also, randomly chosen cans.
And then they also will look at the standard itself and see if it needs to be updated or changed in any way based on the results that they're getting.
And I assume if there were something, if a can had deteriorated, that there is a plan in place, that it would be, that there is a plan for processing it in a very rapid manner or manner so that there would not be.
Yeah, let's say that we saw a particular trend with a group of materials from a particular site or a group of cans that contain a particular type of material of oxide, okay? If we started seeing accelerated corrosion within those group of containers, then we would move those to the top of the list. Yeah.
So there's a plan for
Yeah.
handling incidents.
It would be very similar to the plan that Maxine is executing in L area for the CAM CAP for their monitoring program, the fuel that they have there.
Thank you.
I guess we're going to move on to our draft.
So be sure to talk to Tony and the orange shirt after such a nice guy.
I told him I was gonna grade him on his performance.
Thank you so much for being the third person, I guess, that was supposed to do this presentation. So there is a draft position paper that I think we're going to be bringing to the executive committee at the September full board meeting, but we wanted the chance at the committee level first to sort of get some input. It's an update from the position paper from 2014 about the budget proposal and some of the effects. Has everyone had a chance to kind of look at it? I know you've looked at it. Harold, was there any kind of, the big thing that we wanted to do was to sort of keep the body of it and the integrity of it the same, but just sort of update the numbers as best they reflect the 2015 budget. And that's been done for the most part, but we would love to hear any comments or feedback on moving it to 2015. Just staring at you. Yep.
George, Aldo, one thing I'd suggest you consider doing, it might need DOE's help on it.
They didn't respond to my email. They did not respond to my email. I didn't get an email response, so I tried on the request for help. So I tried Googling this on my own in a very non-scientific way.
Well, I mean, the bottom line here is saying budget's been cut. Because of the budget cut, the operations of the waste management, liquid waste, DWPF, is going to extend X years. Now, when you extend that operation, that system, it's costing about $400 million, something like that. It's almost all fixed cost. There's very little variable cost. So if you run it, you make half the cans in DWPF, you don't save half the money of running DWPF. You save a few bucks because you didn't buy as many cans. Same thing applies to the whole liquid waste system. And if, the less I remember, the number's around $400 or $500 billion a year, something like that. Whatever it is, the number's there. And if you're going to delay the closing of the waste management system, say 4 years to pick a number, it would be $2 billion in that ballpark. Now that 4-year delay saved a few $100 million of investment. So somehow or other, if you could get those numbers and just highlight them in some kind of summary sentence in there, I think it would kind of add a lot of bang to the letter. I mean, the letter's a good letter.
My only other thing was the thing with the system plan 17 rather than 19, but we can fix that. The only thing I thought that we might consider is making this not just specific to the 2015 budget, but to that budget and budgets thereafter, that the budget be funded to meet all of these milestones and, in fact, with goal of maybe maximizing the facilities that we have at the site. But, I mean, I realize that we talked about just updating it so it was 2015. But
I mean, I guess that I really like your idea because otherwise we'll have to update it yearly.
No.
Because it will get outdated quickly. And if we add that part to run it at maximum and focus on the fines, I'm wondering if that would make it more relevant.
Well, you've spent all this time on it. If you wanna, you know, there's no harm in making these changes. Change what, you know, take Joe's suggestion and do things that I've had to change. And make sure, but you have not had input from DOE that these numbers are accurate yet?
No, just from DHEC and from looking at the website. And Joe, where did you get your numbers?
Trying to go from memory about $400 million a year or something.
Is there a place that I can go and get that source? Or maybe Pat or Maxine can send me sort of an email with additions?
You indicate that you sent this, Ashley, we've already got this for comment? Or
well, Nina didn't let me, you didn't let me know they didn't get back to you, I'm sorry. Yeah, we sent an email out, to John Lopez and to another gentleman. I gave them Nina's email. They must have been busy and weren't able to get back to you, but, and we'll follow up and see. I wasn't aware that they hadn't gotten back to you.
I've not seen it, and it looks like on page 2, the stuff in green for spent fuel. I know this L area, Maxine kill me if her budget was $3 million.
Yeah, that was not right.
So we'll get you we can get you the correct information, and Ashley can send it out to the main points of contact. So I'm sure we can get that, we can clarify those numbers.
I'm not sure where the green part came from. That was the new addition.
I'll find out where.
Yeah, I see that part. I don't think mine had that.
Nina?
Just out of curiosity.
Can you hear us? Oh.
Nina.
Go ahead, Rose. We can hear you.
Did you see any of the language in the original documentation where there was a commitment by DOE and probably other involved agencies to remove the materials, some of those materials that were taken in by SRS? And in those documents, what was the language, or how was the language used to refer to the cost of, the inevitable cost of all of that?
I'm looking at the original one, and I don't see where that was done. The only part was that the cleanup of the tanks is subject to the enforceable agreements, and the public expects the Department of Energy to meet the commitments that have been made. But that's the only language in there.
Yeah, well, they make commitments to pay fines if, you know, if these landmarks were missed, but there must have been some money discussed at the time. They couldn't have just thrown out the idea, we're going to process this stuff. There had to have been some projected cost to it.
Something about, so if the original agreement was made, so I guess when the original agreement was made, at that point, somebody must have believed that it could have been cleaned up. Because I don't think anyone would have agreed to do something knowing that there would be a potential $154 million fine. Is that what you're saying, Rose?
Well, also, there had to have been a projected cost involved for processing and removing this material. I would think that SRS management would have those numbers.
Yeah, and Pat McGuire with DOE, you're bringing up a very good point, and it shows again, my own personal opinion, not of the department, possibly the lack of integration when we negotiate and develop Appendix D of the Federal Facility Agreement is not linked very well to budgets, because budgets are done in a 3-year budget cycle. The Federal Facility Agreement is done annually, and things, and again, I'm not the expert on federal facility agreements, but the 5-year outlooks aren't enforceable, and by the time they get into the 1 and 2 years, they become enforceable. And then, obviously, the budgets, we develop budget requests and budget formulation, but it's not until right before the execution year that Congress, the end of October 1st is supposed to pass the budget, and a lot of times they we communicate what's in federal facility agreements, but Congress does what Congress will do. So there is somewhat of a lack of integration between federal facility agreement and development and budget, which is very, it's congressionally mandated, that's what they do. And they will make decisions up until the last minute. And that's why we have continuing resolutions and lots of appropriations. They can't agree. And so that's obviously a real problem. We know what it costs. We know what, when we negotiate agreements and milestones, we have, I don't want to say expect, because we don't expect much, but we believe that we will have those in our budget formulations. How that gets through Congress and everything, that's outside of our control.
I wonder if that would be better in a recommendation, incorporating that in the position paper. Working on.
That could be a separate one.
Integrating. Because to see your point, it kind of sucks to be in that position when it's happening on different cycles. And
it is. The problem is there may not be an easy solution. The real solution would be multi-year budgets for the departments that would help us be able to see, but that has never been anything that has been contemplated by Congress.
So that might be better as a recommendation than in the position paper. Which I'm wondering if strategic and legacy management.
On that stage of the budget.
Yeah. Well,
it's a very strange way to run a duck farm.
We all live.
You get the plan and then you say, well, it's like saying, okay, we're going to build a house and we're going to build a 3,000 square foot house, and then we'll see how we pay for it later on. Mm-hmm. There must have been some commitment to money, a specific sum of money for these programs.
Which I guess it was only for that year, really.
Yep. Rose, this is Tony Polk with DOE again. In general, to the best of our ability, we take the information that we've got about budgets and what we know is happening, and we formulate agreements based on what we can see in the future. The reality is that the only thing that's certain generally is about a year down the road. That's even become less certain over the last few years, and so it makes it very difficult. But all the intentions are there initially with the department to try and determine where we're going to be in budget space years down the road when we make those kinds of commitments to the regulators.
I think we can add something like that into the position paper, but I'm wondering if we can also at some point discuss a recommendation on that. Okay. Well, Amy, you have a question. Oh, I'm sorry.
This is Lee Poe. I'm looking at this thing, and it's the first time I've seen it, and I find it very surprising. I don't understand its purpose, the intent, or anything else. Maybe I haven't gotten to the end of it now, mind you. I've gotten to the end of the bottom of the first page, and it's not clear to me why the CAB is doing something like this.
Well, I think the reason it's a position paper, not a recommendation, is precisely because what you said. It might fall a little bit out of the scope. I think if you get to the last couple of sentences on the last page, it's the goal to reinstate full funding to meet the milestones of the liquid waste cleanup program, and to meet that commitment.
Yeah, I understand the CAB's interest in doing that, but this doesn't do that.
Keep going.
I read the last page.
It gets better.
There's nothing else.
Right. It does. The goal on it, I think, when it was originally done for last year and updated this year, is that there were several people that commented that the fines that can be incurred for not completing the program timely could be best used somewhere else. And I think everyone was very concerned about these giant fines that were floating around. And if the site was able to do more and have the ability, which everyone kind of knows that they have the ability to do, to clean it up and meet those milestones, why is the budget not allowing them to do that? Because at the end of the day, the fines are going to come out of the same purse that the money to just do the program will come out of.
The thing I was trying to convey is the fact that the extended life cycle cost is going to be much, much greater than the fine.
Yes.
So you have more driver there if you can get that point across.
If you can email Ashley and kind of give me an idea of where I could get those numbers.
Where's Pat? I mean, Pat, you got in your plan what the operating costs are for the liquid waste system.
Yes.
And those are, you had 4 years because of the delay in budget.
Yes, we know what
They're
those
going to pay
increases.
X dollars for the capital you're saving. It's going to cost you, hundreds of millions, probably billions of dollars more in the life cycle cost
Yes.
of the facility.
Yeah, we have all
That's
If
the
you can
numbers.
send me those numbers would be great. And then, she'll have a comment and then Maxine. Well, I'm just gonna let Ashley know. Anna Murphy does the life cycle baseline for EM.
Anna would get that.
So she would have those numbers. And she should have it already tallied up between last year and this year to give you the numbers.
Angela Adams, DOE, and your position paper will be given to what entity?
The website, I think, is where
It is not, yeah, it's simply posted. The process is it has to go to the executive committee. If the executive committee feels that it is something that the full board should vote on, then it goes to the board and they discuss it, can make minor changes to it and then vote. It is not reviewed by any DOE person, it is simply,
Ashley's busting is the same,
right?
That's almost right.
Okay.
It is, we do send it up to headquarters
Yeah.
at the DOE
Well, but
for,
they don't-
there's no response.
There's no response.
But
I
they
mean,
do.
it's communicated, but there's no expected response.
And so what I'd like to do is to, possibly comment on it also. So when you send it, we'll be sure to send in comments.
That would be fantastic.
You just need them before the next board meeting, before the executive.
That's an example of what Lee has been preaching for a long time, and that's the kind of information that really might relate to the public. Hey, you're saving me $100 million this year, it's costing me $1.5 billion over the next 15
Let me tell you,
years.
trying to find this information was not easy. On Googling, it was not, so I completely agree. If we could get it in something like that, that would be fantastic. Well, I guess we're up to public comment. Well, I'd like to remind everyone just to sign in. Ashley, is there anything else that's needed? Rose, did you want to say anything before we finish up?
Well, I just want to piggyback on what Lee Pope was saying. Transparency for the Department of Energy is a very critical thing right now. And that's what Lee's comments are going to. And I think that the department would be well served to put out the kind of information we suggested and to be careful when they're doing that to clarify for the public the difference between a 50-year safe storage design for the long-term temporary materials that have been held at various DOE nuclear complexes like SRS, where some material, of course, has been there much longer, and the plan for keeping it safely in a permanent repository. That's my comment.
I just want to know if this presentation is going to go to the full board so we can make that happen. Oh, we do. I would love to take this for the full board, Rose.
Well, I think you should take another cut at it, and then yes, I think we should take it to the full board. We keep trying to support South Carolina DHEC, our governor, the concerned public, the organizations that come to our meeting and express their concern and share their ideas. And I think that it's kind of incumbent upon us to keep prodding the cow. They should be putting the money up there. As Governor Haley and Catherine Templeton said they don't much care where they get the money, but there was a commitment to give us the money to do the jobs. So I think it's incumbent upon us to put papers out saying, put the money up.
You mean, I think the K area. The presentation on K area, did you want to bring that before the full board?
Yeah, definitely.
Do we have time this year, Ashley, or do we need to look at the schedule? Because I know there was okay, because I know there were some other topics that they wanted to make.
There's nothing else scheduled for news from you.
Okay.
Well, we won't have any recommendations except the position paper. The other 307 is just going to remain open indefinitely until they do the test and give us their report. So we will have extra time in our session for both.
Make sure you put your slides, your picture slides for the K area one.
Perfect.
Slides, just
Yes.
switch them.
Yes. Okay.
Well, thank y'all so much. Just make sure you sign in, and it's September 20th and 21st, Ashley, our full board.
During the 22nd, right?
22nd, 23rd. 22nd and 23rd. Oh, wait, we have one last final comment. Tom?
Tom Clements, Savannah Riverside Watch. I'm taking to the DOE people. I may have kind of casually commented before, but I am going to be taking about a 10-day tour in Germany, meeting with Bundestag, going to Ahaus and Jülich, and meeting with the North Rhine-Westphalen government people and others to talk about the issue of the status of storage of the gas reactor spent fuel in Germany. So it's going to be quite an interesting trip. I'm very excited to do it and tacking on some personal stuff too. But that's coming up in September, so I won't be at the next CAB meeting. Sorry to miss it down in Beaufort. Thank you.
You're gonna be in October, yeah.
October.
I think it's October just all the time.
But it actually is September.
You made it sound so good. You do that. I'm gonna sell for a campaign.